everyone. I'm Frances Markle, President of the Northeast Association of Realtors, and I'd like to welcome you to our first installment of Pro in the Know. Today, we will delve into Massachusetts's pro-housing law impacting MBTA communities. Joining me today is our pro, Audrey Hettinger, Government Affairs Associate with the Massachusetts Association of Realtors. In her role, Audrey serves as a liaison for the Realtor Political Action Committee and tracks local advocacy issues around the state that impact housing, looking for opportunities for Realtor members to have their voices heard in their community. She focuses particularly on MBA communities, public engagement, and compliance. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you so much for having me.
Okay. Before we get into the nitty-gritties of the MBTA law, can you give us some background why Massachusetts needed a pro-housing law in the first place?
Yeah, of course. So I'm sure we all know Massachusetts is in a housing shortage. An analysis from the Baker administration in 2021 estimated that the state needs about 125 to 200,000 housing units to meet demand by 2030. We also all know that one of our best assets in the state is our skilled workforce, and high housing costs makes it increasingly difficult for us to retain workers, so it'll hurt our long-term growth and prosperity as a state. It's unlikely that the new law, that the goal of it, will impact our rents, since this is a zoning mandate, not a building mandate. Another fun fact about it is only 14% of our multifamily housing units in the greater Boston region were permitted by right as from 2015 to 2017. So this makes it increasingly difficult for our state to build multifamily housing. It makes it a much longer process that requires special permits, rezoning, or 40B measures.
Okay, so it's interesting because I live in a town where our zoning is 1 acre for each house, basically. And so can you go in and explain exactly what the MBTA laws and, how many communities are impacted by this?
Yeah, sure. So the law impacts 177 communities, mainly in the greater Boston and central regions of the state, and it will require them to create a reasonably sized zoning district that allows multifamily housing by right at the capacity of at least 15 units per acre. Again, it's not a building mandate, which tends to scare some people. It's just that the town needs to create the zoning to allow for the housing to be built.
And I think that was some of the questions that people were asking me. Is it a building mandate? And clearly it's not. It's just a zoning mandate. So the people that own this, well, we'll go into that later. Tell me about how are the communities responding to this in general?
Yeah, so it's been a mixed response in general for sure. In Massachusetts, for a long time now, zoning's been a local power that municipalities have held, and a lot of them do not like the state coming in and telling them pretty much to change the zoning or maybe the character of their community. At the end of January 2022, so 2 years ago now, all of the 177 communities faced their first deadline to achieve interim compliance, which it was not a heavy lift for them. They just had to submit their action plan for compliance. And all towns did except for one, which is Holden, which maybe we can get into a bit later. But on some of the better responses so far, we've had two communities, Lexington and Salem, pass their zoning ordinance early ahead of their 2024 deadline, which
that's
is
great.
really exciting.
Yeah.
And Salem's been a pro-housing community for a while. So I would say that was not unexpected of them, but still great to see. At the end of 2023, 12 rapid transit communities faced their first real deadline to pass this zoning and bring it into effect. All 12 did pass zoning. However, in Milton, they had a special town meeting just for the zoning mandate in December. It took them 2 nights and several hours of debate. But but eventually they did pass with over 2/3 vote. However, after the meeting, a group of citizens were able to gather 3,000 signatures that's now forcing a town-wide referendum. So now the citizens of Milton must go back to the polls next Tuesday on the 13th to vote on this zoning again.
I was reading about that, and it's kind of interesting that it passed finally after, as you said, 2 days, and then the local residents said, "Oh, no, no, no." What are there any consequences if people do not comply with the law?
Absolutely. There are several consequences if communities do not comply. They're at risk of losing funding from over a dozen state grants that help with community planning, downtown initiatives, climate change initiatives, and land use planning groups. Grants are just a few. Our Attorney General, Andrea Campbell, has also stated that the state does plan to sue towns that do not comply with the law, as it is a law. They're also at risk of liability under federal and state fair housing laws.
Wow. Okay. So it seems like people should get their act together. I'd be interesting to see. So you said the ballot for Milton is on the 13th?
Yes, so it's coming right up.
Okay. Should be interesting. Do the towns have any discretion where the location of the zoning is or anything like that? How does that work out? Or does the state get involved with that?
So the state does have some say on where the zoning must be located. So the zoning district has to be located within 0.5 miles of the town's transit station, with at least half of the district's land area within that 0.5 mile radius whenever possible. In adjacent communities or small town adjacent communities that do not have a transit station, but they're next to a larger town that does have one. If they still have that multifamily zoning requirement, they do have a bit more leeway on where they can place it, as they don't have that half-mile radius.
Okay. So it so there are some guidelines there, but what about what they can build? Could it be mixed use? Can you have restaurants on the bottom and apartments on the top or something like that? Or
Yes, so it does get a bit tricky. In August of 2023, the Executive Office of Housing and Livable Communities did update their guidelines for the law to allow for some mixed use purposes. Secretary Augustus announced that up to 25% of the units in a town can be zoned or can be located in zoning districts that allow for mixed use purposes, but it cannot be over 25%. And they must still keep that 15 units per acre capacity requirement.
how are the municipalities creating their compliance plans and engaging the public?
Yeah, so towns were required to create and submit their action plan for compliance at the end of January 2022. I said earlier this wasn't a heavy lift for them because the state did kind of outline what their compliance plan should look like, and it does require community engagement as a part of their plan. Again, the plan provided information on the town's current zoning, any past multifamily housing developments that have passed in that town. And then they also had to state the potential districts that they were looking at or locations for those districts. Any community that did submit the action plan, which was all of them aside from Holden, have been deemed with interim compliance for now. However, that's the state can take away that designation at any point if they feel that they're not making substantial progress to actually passing this zoning. The state also has ample resources for communities. They have been providing technical grants to help them plan. They've also hosted over 24 webinars since the start of the law or since the passing of it to help towns get a better idea of what the zoning should look like and how they can engage their communities. On my end, each week I go through a platform and I track any outreach events that that are happening in municipalities that are affected by this law. And from what I'm seeing, they are really focusing on community engagement. Most towns will have either an online survey posted or just a general feedback column, along with all of the potential districts that they've been looking at for residents to either rank them in order of what they would like to see passed or just give general feedback. They've also been going a bit more in depth in hosting either in-person or Zoom or hybrid webinars to give residents a better idea of what the law is. As I've mentioned a few times, a lot of people think that this is a building mandate, but it's just for zoning.
So it could be an opportunity when it's rezoned for, agents or realtors working with developers to contact someone that's there and say, do you want to put up, these structures, these housing units? Correct?
Yeah, absolutely. It's going to provide for a lot of great opportunity down the road for these communities.
Right. And so it's just increasing the housing density in Massachusetts to meet the needs of the people.
Yes, exactly. And this housing crisis really has been building for several decades in our state. The majority of Massachusetts housing was built before the 1980s, I believe. So we're really overdue for updating our housing stock.
Yeah. Well, I know that I've been a realtor for over 20 years, and a couple things. One, I noticed firsthand the housing shortage in Massachusetts, but also two, I think this is the first time a law like this has been passed since I've been a realtor. Would you agree? It's so significant compared to any other kind of pro-housing law? I haven't seen anything that impacted the state as much as this.
Yes, absolutely. It is by far the most significant pro-housing law we've seen in the past few decades in the state. And again, that can kind of be why some of these communities are wary about it, as they've had local zoning power for years now, and now the state is kind of walking back on that.
Okay. A couple of times you mentioned the town of Holden. Did you want to say anything else about that?
Absolutely. So Holden is one of our outlier towns, or I would say the outlier town. Since the creation of the law in 2021, they have outright said that they do not like the state coming in and making decisions for them, and they do not plan on complying with the law. So they're the only town that did not submit an action plan, and they are the only town as of now that's deemed uncompliant. They have had a few consequences to that so far, however. In late 2023, just a few months ago, they were sued by the Central Massachusetts Housing Alliance, and then two individuals in the town sued the town of Holden, the Board of Selectmen, and their town manager for their non-compliance to the law. The Massachusetts Superior Court did dismiss this case in mid-December due to a lack of standing, which essentially just means that Holden's lack of compliance does not cause any direct physical harm to those that sued them. So Lawyers for Civil Rights, which is a group based out of Massachusetts, is filing appeal against that dismissal, and we're waiting probably another month or so for the decision of that appeal.
Wow. So lots going on.
Lots going on for sure. Holden does have until the end of 2025 to reach compliance. However, we'll wait and see what happens.
Okay. Let's see. Do we have any questions coming in? Because we'd like to open this up to you guys out there to see if you have any other questions here that we could ask.
Okay, we had a question from one of our participants, and she was wondering where she could access the webinars you mentioned earlier that they can share with clients to help get them engaged in the zoning in their community.
Yeah, so they're posted on mass.gov. I'm happy to send a link over to Maria if you would be able to share it.
Absolutely.
I'm happy to get that to you because they are all posted online. A lot of town web pages too, I'm finding, are creating MBTA community pages that list their action plan, the districts that they're looking at, and then they also have a calendar of community events. Communities, from what I'm seeing, are really looking to engage their residents and educate them on the law.
She's also asked for some overall information. So where would be the best place to direct her for more information about that? Should we be looking at the municipality's individual websites or going to mass.gov?
I would say both would be a great option. Mass.gov will give you a more technical overview of what the law looks like and what's required for municipalities from a state level. But then if you want to get into the specifics of what's required from your town, because they do vary from town to town, I would suggest looking at your town's website, or I'm happy to put my information in the chat as well. And I'm happy to be a resource for any of you understanding what the law looks like in your specific community.
Did see something come in a chat too. Someone asked if Dunstable was not part of it and why. And they are not part of it because they are isolated from all the lines, because if you have a line going through, correct me if I'm wrong, you have like the rapid transit, or if you have a bus line and stuff like that, it's that plus the adjacent community. But Dunstable is not part of it because it's, it has Tingsboro as the adjacent community. All the towns around it are the adjacent community. Is there a map we could show people? We have a map to it, and I saw it on your site.
There's a great Boston Globe article that I've been referencing the past few months since it came out, and it has an interactive map, so you can select your town and it'll bring you right to their requirements and their compliance deadline. I'm happy to share that link as well.
Audrey, can you tell our group a few different ways that they can get involved in this process, as well as a little bit about the MRECA?
Of course. So one way to get involved with the process is to reach out to me. I've been connecting with a few pro-housing groups across the state that are also working on advocacy and compliance with this law. So I'm happy to connect you with those resources, and then also provide you with any updates that I'm seeing from your town. And then I'm also glad you brought up MRECA, which is our C4 organization, a nonprofit that we started about a year or two ago at MAR. And the funds for MRECA are used for pro-housing research and pro-housing advocacy.
Wait, before you go there, just make sure everyone knows what the acronym stands for.
Yes, thank you. Thank you, Francis. It's the Massachusetts Real Estate Community Alliance. We think that we could have a great opportunity to really tap into the MRECA with our compliance with MBTA Communities. Since that's not a realtor-focused group, you can talk about MRECA with your clients. They can contribute if they would like. So it's more of a public-facing way that we can advocate for communities to comply.
So how would you recommend we approach these conversations with the NIMBY mentality? Because we don't want to be almost ousted by sharing, hey, we want this, we are pro-housing. And on the flip side, if we share that view, it gets into that gray area of, well, I don't want you representing me.
Yeah, that's a great question. And a few others have had the same as I've worked on this law. I would say the best way to kind of have those conversations with, a NIMBY that you run into would to be to describe that, or really enforce that this isn't a building mandate, it's just a zoning change, and it's highly unlikely that these units would be built 5-10 years down the road. It's really up to what any developer might want. And also, another aspect of this law isn't just our housing crisis, it's also targeting more transit-oriented development. which is smart to create livable, walkable communities, which I think is
Mm.
something that clients all want to see. And it's also more environmentally friendly for our communities.
What are the major objections that we're hearing from some of the municipalities, and how can our members help respond to these objections beyond, that NIMBYism mentality?
Yeah, so some of the objections that we're hearing is again that people think that these giant skyscrapers are going to come up in their neighborhoods when really 15 units per acre does not look like that. It could look like a duplex or townhomes. MassGov also has some great examples of what 15 units per acre looks like, and they're very neighborhood friendly developments. Also, just focusing on the general community benefits that are given for multifamily housing. And then again, the consequences of noncompliance. These communities are at risk to be sued from the state, violate fair housing laws, and they'll also lose access to over a dozen grants that will largely impact their community over the years.
Another question we just got in is, do all the communities have the end of 2024 deadline?
No, they do not. So 130 communities, so the vast majority do have until the end of the year to comply. There were 12 that faced a 2023 year-end deadline, and then those small adjacent communities have until the end of 2025.
I can't believe it's we're almost out of time here. Do you have any closing remarks that you'd like to say, Audrey?
Yes, first of all, thank you so much for having me. I'm happy to share any resources that I have regarding MBTA communities with you all, and I'll send those links out to Maria afterwards. This is a law that depends a lot on community engagement, and I think as realtors, you're all equipped with the knowledge of what your community needs, and you understand the housing shortage that we're in. If you have any questions afterwards or would like to get involved with your community, I'll throw my email in the chat now, and please feel free to reach out to me at any time.
Thank you so much for being our pro in the know. And also this is being recorded, so I know that Maria is going to post it. And when she does, she will also add those links in there when she posts it for other people that weren't able to join us. So thank you once again, and thank you everyone else that attended. Cheers.
Thank you.